Welcome to this month's Minute with Victor, where Dr. Cotton answers your questions.
This month's question comes from a physician who writes, I don't understand how something can be standard of care when most physicians aren't doing it. For example, the guidelines for heart failure recommend multi-drug regimens. There's data to support it, and people say that it's standard of care, but chart surveys repeatedly show that less than half of eligible patients are on these drugs. How can the guideline be standard of care when it isn't being followed? Let's start with the basics. The standard of care is defined as what a reasonable physician would do in a given situation. By what a reasonable physician would do. The standard of care isn't determined by what certain people do, by what some people do, or even by what most people do. It's determined by what a reasonable physician acting in accordance with the literature would do. And if that physician would do something, then that something is the standard of care regardless of what anyone else would do. Now, in your situation, there are certain drugs which have proven benefits in heart failure, and the guidelines recommend using them. So the question is whether a reasonable physician would prescribe these drugs. And I think the answer is clearly that he would, which means that it's the standard of care, and that's the end of the analysis. Now, what about the fact that many of us aren't actually doing this? Well, that's standard of practice, not standard of care. Standard of care is what a reasonable physician would do. That's the legal standard. Standard of practice is what people tend to do, and that may or may not be what we're supposed to do, but it's legally irrelevant. If I drive my car out here to the stop sign, the reasonable thing to do is stop. So that's the standard of care. But that's not what most people do. We slow significantly, but we don't actually stop. But let's suppose a police officer pulls you over for not stopping, and you decide to go with the infamous standard of practice defense, which goes something like this. But officer, come on, nobody actually stops. As you might imagine, that defense doesn't work very well at the roadside, and we shouldn't rely on it at the bedside. Thanks again for listening.